Good morning and welcome to WNHH Radio's Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make the Elm City tick. New Haven Fire Chief John Alston Jr. makes New Haven tick. He's here to tell us about how he does that. Welcome to new WNHH, Chief Alston, and thanks for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
Well, your voice is sounding good there. You project.
Oh, boy. Then maybe I need to move the microphone away. How about that?
No, it's perfect.
Appreciate it.
It's perfect. And because usually I have to tell people to get so close they're almost kissing the mic, but you're projecting, man.
Oh, you're too kind.
Thanks to Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. So, Chief Alston, I just wanted to let our listeners get to know you a bit. It's 2 years now. You've been the fire chief in New Haven. And in New Haven political years, that's 2 decades. Dog years would be 14 years, but if you're a top dog, that's 20 years. So you've been surviving and surviving quite well.
Surviving, thank you.
So,
I see you out there in the streets reporting on our activities, both the good, the bad, and the indifferent.
It's funny. Our readers love firefighters. I mean, there's always drama with firefighters because they have a lot of hours in a day when they're just getting some trouble and rat on each other and stuff. But unlike with police officers, I mean, firefighters might face possible death more often than a police officer, but police officers are more controversial. Everybody seems to love firefighters. They seem to be like instant heroes. Do you think that's true in a community?
I think so. I think what ends up happening is that in terms of what we end up doing, we are plugged in. We're an all hazards response agency. So that means medical, squeaky noises, bumps that go in the night. We just came in. I apologize for my mode of address. 4 o'clock in this morning, we had a chemical smell that we had to investigate this morning.
So you were sleeping at 4 o'clock, you got woken up.
Firefighters do not sleep, sir. We rest between alarms.
But you really never sleep?
Actually, I'm one of those people that I just don't get enough sleep, I guess. I had one of those Fitbits on, and then the Garmin watch, and then the Apple Watch. I average 3.5 hours worth of sleep a night. So
how does a person function? I can't function under 7.
Well, it's been like that for the last 25 years. So it just becomes a habit. I've been forcing myself to try and get more sleep because I know eventually my body will pay the price. I'm pushing 60.
So 4 in the morning, were you asleep when you got the call?
I just closed my eyes. Normally I get up lay down about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and I'm right back up at 3 o'clock. Doesn't matter where I am. And I was actually looking at the phone when it lit up, so I had half an eye open, and I gave them a call and said, what do you have going on? And they told me.
Chemical spill near the Hamden border off State Street near a chemical plant.
Yeah, it actually came in as a call from the Hamden side, and we got a call that a person was having smelled an odor and was having an issue, but it was also a person that had previous respiratory problems, so we had to rule that out. But we also know that we have a chemical facility there. So
on Welton Street, right?
That is correct.
And that's right on the border.
Right on the border. So we got there, and we did end up with a odor inside of the Leeway Assisted Living Facility, but it was isolated to a bathroom. So then you have to go through the process of investigating drains, whether it's in the air. So we made sure that all the alphabet organizations were out there to make sure that we looked at every possible angle, and we just believe it was an isolated incident, honest mistake.
And what do you mean by isolated? You mean someone drops it? So it didn't come from the chemical plant?
Well, we can't prove that it did, and we can't prove that it didn't. We just know that it dissipated.
Is the chemical plant next door to the assisted living?
It's across the street.
So did you go over to the chemical plant?
Oh, of course. Yeah, we went into every room there. We had the slight odor in one room, but that was also one of those open drain rooms. But since the incident that I experienced 2 years ago, we made sure that there were relief valves and additional alarm systems put in place.
And nothing had gone on.
None of those had gone on.
Now let's bring our listeners back to that, because this was a return to the past and to the future for Chief John Alston this morning when you got that call 4 in the morning. Because you came here in December of 2016.
Yep, October 2016.
And, October.
Yeah.
And your first month, you got called to the same location.
Well, let me tell you, the first, I'm going to say 60 days that I was here, it was like a roller coaster. So we had the Harbor Close condominium fire, building collapse. We had another 2-alarm fire, and then we had the chemical overpressure.
Now, chemical officer Matt, wasn't there a boom at that chemical plant? Wasn't there an explosion
Oh
of
yeah,
sorts?
absolutely. So we don't call it an explosion because there was no heat or fire. It was an overpressure in one of the affluent tanks.
And people heard it.
Oh yeah.
And then
Oh,
there
yeah.
was an odor, and people had to leave their homes.
Oh yeah. It was
at this plant.
It was the equivalent of a large balloon exploding or pushing out pressure.
And at the time, it brought to the surface, as you knew in your very quick education, New Haven. You're one of the quickest learners I've ever met in terms of how the city works and the politics and all that, and who's up to what. But what we found out there was that people living near that plant for years had felt that the owners were not responsive to their safety concerns. And you and Jim Tercio from the building department and elected officials had a series of meetings and then hearings with the neighbors and with the plant owners.
Correct.
And as you just mentioned in passing just now, you put some changes into place.
Yes. So they were changing over from the old process of producing chlorine to a newer, cleaner process where they produce it on demand and they're not storing it, which is excellent. But in that transition, in that period, there were some systems that we wanted, some early warning systems in place.
So that would have gone off this morning if there had been a problem.
If there had been a chemical release, yeah.
So that was that kicked into play somewhat this morning.
No, actually, it came in because of the person that called in.
No, what I meant is that you now had a quicker read.
Oh, absolutely.
In fact, of those changes.
Yeah, we were actually able to send out text message blasts within 2,000 feet of the facility to keep the neighborhood updated.
So neighbors must have been concerned when you got there.
Sure. Well, anytime you see 5 fire trucks parked outside your street, you might want.
So in the end, just to recap, you found out that it was in the assisted living place in one room. There was some kind of chemical odor.
Some kind of odor, yeah.
But it was not related to the chemical plant.
We are not sure.
Oh.
It was not inside the traps. So here's what happens when you get a type of odor like that in what we would call basically a closed building, okay, because of the temperature outside and because of an HVAC system. We're not sure if it got sucked into one of the air handlers or whether the odor came up from the drain. We're still investigating that part of it. But it dissipated on arrival.
And everybody's health is okay.
Everyone's fine.
And you got your investigators going today.
Yeah, and we've got all the contact numbers that we need in at Leeway. We've met with their administration early this morning to keep them apprised of all the activities.
So you're hearing from New Haven Fire Chief John Alston Jr. here on Dateline New Haven, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenindependent.org. Also, these days, the steep cold set in. Now today, it's going to be a balmy 40-something degrees. But last couple of days have been our coldest days of the season.
Sure. Down
towards zero. And what has that meant for the fire department?
Well, it's very difficult for our members. One, they've got to bundle up a lot more. They're going to be exposed to all of the injuries that you can have with cold emergency injuries, frostbite and alike. The other things that we have to be concerned with, we fight fire with water. So we have to be concerned with frozen hydrants.
Do they get frozen?
Sure they do. Sure they do.
How do you keep them unfrozen?
Well, we've done a great job with our pre-inspection before we got to the cold snap. We have a great relationship with the Regional Water Authority. But the firefighters are diligent about getting out, doing their district familiarization.
Does that mean a cold snap's coming so you make sure that the hydrants aren't susceptible to freezing?
Correct.
And was it that they normally will not freeze unless there's a porous opening, or?
Sure. If there's any type of maintenance issue with them, if they've got a pre-existing leak of some kind that will now freeze and snap a valve or get a valve to be stuck, and when we're trying to open it, we end up snapping it. As long as it's in its regular operating condition, 9 times out of 10 we can get it open.
So have you encountered any frozen hydrants?
Not as of yet, but we haven't had any fires in the last week.
Thank God.
Thank God. Knock on wood.
How many do we have a year?
On average, about 200 of
and
varying
most of
sizes.
Them very small, or?
That ranges from anything from a one-room burnout, knockdown, to a full-fledged house fire where you're losing or fighting a fire on multiple floors, or even from one building to the other.
I think maybe, I'm not sure if it was a bigger fire than the Trinity Bar. Maybe the biggest one to date occurred on your first 60 days.
Harbor Landing. It was
condos
Harbor,
over City
Harbor
Point.
Landing. It was the day after Christmas, and I wasn't staying where I am now. I was actually staying at Village Inn Suites.
So you were nearby.
I was nearby.
You could smell it,
and I smelled it. And
Oh,
it was
my.
interesting because my dad and my wife go, well, the fireplace is going. And I'm going, no, that's more than a fireplace. And I stepped outside, and that's when the radio started going off. Went to a second alarm, and I told them, I bid them a farewell, and turned the corner and saw it.
And how big a fire was that? How it was a
Oh, that was large. It damaged a full section of that
condo complex.
the condo complex.
Yeah, Norma
multiple
Rodriguez, who
floors.
works here, lives there. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
probably met them that night.
But nobody was hurt, right?
No one, thank God. 36 hours.
Wow.
That was an incident.
36 hours.
36 hours, because we ended up having to come back the next night because there were portions that we couldn't get to because of how that complex is designed. There's an entire section of rear that we couldn't get to. And eventually, when it dried out, it lit up again.
Wow. But no one got hurt? Or
No, just minor, non-life-threatening slips, trips.
And John Alston, what's your impression of New Haven after 2 years? How's the city compared to other communities?
Oh, I love the city of New Haven. Like I said, I didn't come here because it was a bad city, and I didn't come here because it was a bad fire department. I've been coming to this area probably the last 30 years.
What for?
Training and friends doing a lot of taking classes and
Now
training.
you teach classes.
Yeah. Been teaching firematics probably since 1991.
What are firematics?
The process of putting together the science and application of firefighting. So firematics are hydraulics, learning how much water to apply. Firematics are the tactics, line selection and placement, coordinated attack. It is all of what we do.
One of the reasons I really enjoy talking to you is that you have this whole other language and knowledge of the nitty-gritty of how that stuff works that to the rest of us is fascinating.
Well, if you step into any firehouse, every one of us talks like this.
So you had 31 years fighting fires in Jersey City. Is that where you're from originally?
I'm born and raised in Jersey City.
So you were there during the Brett Schundler years?
Yes, home of the honest politician. Actually, I got in trouble. I supported Brett Schundler, the first Republican in almost 75
that was
years.
in the 90s, right?
To become to win.
But then he did that selling all the tax liens and that.
Well, there were some things that
he was brash.
He was that he tried that were new, I'll say. What I liked about him was that he at least came in and had a plan, and it wasn't it didn't seem so foreign to me, and he was interested in the fire service.
Were there changes in fire service?
Yeah.
And you were young then, right? You were in your 20s or 30s?
I was up there, 30, 30 or so, yeah. I was born in 1960.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Boy, you look so much younger.
You look better.
I always thought it was about 10, 15 years on you. What month in 1960?
November. I'll be 59 this year.
Okay, yeah, me too. So Jersey City grew up, and what you said you wanted to be a firefighter since you took a ride along at 4 years old?
4 years old.
Well, tell me about that.
Yeah, I tell the story all the time, so anyone that's heard it before knows. I was born in 1960, in the inner cities, they were burning. There was a lot of civil unrest.
60, you were 8 years old? Oh, 7 years old at the big Newark, right?
Yeah, the Newark riots and the like. So
That's
I remember the fire trucks
video.
going back and forth all the time. I lived around the corner from the firehouse, and I had a toy fire engine, and of course, and I cut my leg on it. My dad kind of took it away from me. And it just upset me so. And so every time they would ride by, I would, yell and scream. And then one day, actually on my Facebook page, there's a picture of me and my godmother standing out in front of that cold water flat where they picked me up on the porch. And they said, hey, can you ride around the corner? And my mom said, yeah. And that was it.
Wow.
And believe it or not.
What was it about fire? I mean, boys like fire trucks, but what was this about fire, not to be like construction worker, plumber?
It's just most young kids, when they see a fire truck go by, it's loud, it's big, the lights are flashing. At that age, it attracts them. But it was just something about seeing that truck all the time. I just knew I wanted to ride it.
Wow. And Bob Gilliam says, watching from Dubai, Chief John.
Oh, fantastic.
And Mike Rogers says, Chief in all caps and 3 exclamation points. Thanks for listening, guys. And you're listening to Dateline New Haven on WNHH-FM. And live stream NewHavenIndependent.org, and we're with Fire Chief John Alston Jr. So when did you become a firefighter?
February 22nd, 1985.
So you were 25. So you've done some other things first.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
So I went to college, then came out of there. I was at the time I became a firefighter. Believe it or not, I had been laid off as a public school um, substitute teacher.
Wow,
and I was working.
They don't pay those people anything. I remember a few years ago, my kids when they were in public school, it was $50 a day for those.
Yeah, it was $35 a day. And you know what was worse than that?
No one was nice to you.
When I got I got laid off from there, I tried to collect unemployment, and they were like, "No." So what do you mean? I pay into unemployment. It's well, they've already promised to hire you back in September, so find something to do for the summer.
But I thought you wanted to be a firefighter since you were a kid.
Yeah, but so you got to do something while you're waiting.
Oh, you had been waiting.
Yeah. So I was on the list. And you know how it is. It takes a while. One of the things I've attempted to change here in the city of New Haven is to have lists in place that we can hire people and
we generally
people.
have a list that goes for about 2 years, right?
Correct. It starts with 1 year, and then we can extend it a year.
Are you trying to change that to be more years?
Right now, it's working.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, it's working. So
because you've been in a hiring mode.
We're gonna keep the system in place. We're down about 30 vacancies now. We've got some hiring to do in the next month or so.
Mm-hmm. So what's your pitch to people? Why become a New Haven firefighter?
Why become a New Haven firefighter? One, it's stable employment. It is an opportunity for you to serve a community, whether it be your community or another. But there is nothing like the fire service. We are not like any other agency other than the military where we spend a large amount of time with each other. We spend more than a third of our lives with each other. You learn teamwork. You learn leadership.
And you have no choice but to be around people who are different from you.
Correct.
That's kind of cool.
And I always say, whatever you are, it's going to come out in the firehouse, especially the firehouse kitchen.
Why is that?
That's the gathering place. That's the hub. That's where.
Have you ever been in a firehouse where there was a fire in the kitchen?
Yeah, I've been there. Actually, I was in a firehouse where the fire engine caught on fire.
Wow.
And I was on the watch that night. I kept smelling some metal burning. I thought it was the grill left on. Walked out, the grill was cold. Walked back up the stairs and looked, and the truck was actually ablaze.
Wow.
So I had to get everybody downstairs.
Jose Cotty says, "Hey, Chief." So, Chief, you 31 years you spent in Jersey before you retired, Jersey City. Mm-hmm. What was your top job there?
I retired as a deputy chief there.
Deputy chief, so you rose the ranks.
Yeah, was over special operations, and the day I left, I was over. I was the chief of staff.
So tell me about the day you'll never forget as a firefighter, or one of the days.
Oof. I'm going to say every firefighter has a couple of days that they won't forget. So, do you want the highlights, or do you want the grit? I'll give you the grit.
Give me the grit.
So I was one of those folks who responded to the World Trade Center on September 11th.
Wow. And
so that was a very, very difficult time.
Where were you when you got the call?
I was actually on my roof at home. I terminated my cable TV service. All right. Because I was going to get a satellite service. And so I had no television in the house. Tuesday morning, beautiful day. And I knew that these folks were coming, and I was trying to figure out where they were going to put this dish on my house. So I climbed up onto the roof of my house because I knew the dish had to face southwest. So I wasn't looking northeast, wasn't looking. And I could hear the phone ringing, and I could hear my radio downstairs going off. But my neighbor across the street came running over, and she yells, John, the plane just hit the World Trade Center. And I kind of knew, anyone that knows that, who's in emergency management or a responder, you kind of know that that's not an accident if it's a commercial aircraft. They're trained, like Sully making the landing in the Hudson River. They're trained to ditch that plane where it won't cause the most harm.
So you instantly thought terrorism?
I instantly thought that it was intentional.
Wow.
It was intentional. And then we heard the second plane hit. Because by that time I was already getting in the car because I knew we were going to do something.
And how'd you know you were going to do something? How far is Jersey City?
Jersey City's the other side of the Holland Tunnel. We're 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
But we also have a mutual aid agreement. We have an automatic response into downtown.
And what was your
Manhattan.
job at the time at the department?
I was working in a rescue company.
Were you
working heavy rescue? And initially, they told us that we were going to come into Jersey City and staff the city companies, and the on-duty companies were going to go in. But that plan changed. There were a lot of changes that day. So many people were coming through the Holland Tunnel. Pedestrians walking through, covered in chalk and
the other
dust.
direction.
Yeah.
And
And
now the Holland
then
Tunnel is separated, right? So you wouldn't have been going in that side.
pardon?
Isn't Holland Tunnel separated by direction? Like one direction, there's a wall between the two.
Yeah, there is. So there's one bore, and there are the two tubes. One going.
So you wouldn't have seen the people walking the other.
Oh,
direction.
sure you would have, because they literally came through both tubes. They were walking through.
Oh, they're going through the other direction.
And what happens also.
Wow.
Anytime there's an emergency and emergency traffic needs to get through there, like that day, ambulances and fire trucks, they will shut down the tunnel and allow us to all go in one direction.
All right. So Jennifer Atkins says, hello, Chief. You are interviewing a top-notch cops gentleman, Jose Cotti, Rescue 1 alumni. Come and ride.
Hey,
James
Jose.
Casella, we miss you, Chief. So you
Miss you
instantly
guys,
got
too.
down. The satellite dish was going to have to wait. And what rank were you then?
I was a firefighter.
Firefighter. You knew you were going. Did you get a call from your supervisor?
Yeah. We knew we were going. Like
So
I
the
started in,
supervisor
but we still
called?
got the call. Yeah.
And then did you drive or did you get to the truck?
Drove.
On the truck.
And no, so I drove in my own car to get to Jersey City. I was living in Central Jersey at the time.
What town?
Plainfield. And as I was Plainfield in the house, and we were, I usually hit Route 22, and as soon as I do, you can see the towers. And so just to see that site, so many.
So how
people
long a ride was it into the firehouse?
Well, it seemed like forever, but I what's the statute of limitations?
You're fine.
It felt like I got there in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, we're not going to get you.
Yeah, I got it.
So 20 minutes is a long time there. They must
Sure
have already
is.
sent firefighters over.
Sure. No, right away, actually, we sent a safety officer, and I have to pause because we did lose one of our dispatchers who jumped in the car with one of our safety officers, safety battalion, who was going over to do an assessment. He actually died when the building came down.
Oh, second one?
Came down on top of him, yeah. Yeah, Joseph Lavero, yeah.
So 20 minutes so you get to there.
So you get to there, and then there's chaos. Where do you pick up your gear? So we were telling us not to go to our houses, go to another place to pick up gear, because at that time you knew it was a terroristic act. And then there were hours of people coming over.
But were you still there, or did you go?
Still in Jersey City. It wasn't until about 3 hours after the second building went down that we started deploying over there. And this was something interesting. So our captain and most of the captains of the rescue, special ops captains, were out of town. They were in Texas taking a FEMA course. And so, of course, after that happened, all flights were canceled. They weren't able to fly back. And they were out there with some of the New York City firefighters as well. And so we ended up pairing hodgepodge kind of.
So you got sent 3 hours later.
Yes.
Did you go in a truck?
Yeah, we actually went over in a van.
In the Holland Tunnel.
In the Holland
Tunnel.
Tunnel.
You saw people. Did you have to dodge people walking through the tube?
No, at that time they cleared the tube for us.
They cleared the tube. And
cleared the tube.
And you went in.
Yeah, we went in and we hooked up with New York City firefighters.
And what was your role?
Doing assessment, going down, searching near the pile. I was with my partner at Rescue, Mario Morales. If he's listening, shout out to Mario. We got down. We actually went to one of the bucket trucks that was covered with debris. A lot of the New York City apparatus, battalion cars covered with debris. There were so many people there. The strangest thing, though, Paul, was that the firefighters from New York were thanking us for coming.
So what did you do in this assessing? Like, tell me how you spent your day and how many hours you were there.
We were there till after 2 o'clock in the morning, and we got called back. I appreciate Deputy Chief Tom Kearney. Deputy Chief Tom Kearney was on duty that night, and he made the call. He wanted all the Jersey City people back because he knew at that point we needed to go and check our own families because they were watching all this on.
How you spell Kearney?
Kearney.
And he was a Jersey City.
He was a Jersey City deputy. He was running the city that night, and he made the call. He wanted all his people back.
They must have been worried about who's going to take care of fire service in Jersey City.
Well, we're a pretty robust department. We have a large department. We
so not
on
all
any
you went
given
over.
day. There's about 600 Jersey City firefighters now. At the time, we were a little larger than that, and we keep about 130 of them on duty.
So he says the day you'll never forget, just because you saw the scene, or did you have any actions that day you'll
Just
never forget?
Just a lot of activity. A lot of activity.
And
it took me about 13 years to get past that.
How so? What happened?
No, just dealing with it. It was a lot.
Because of the death
lost
you
a
saw?
bunch of friends. You could
Was it
hear
from
them
what
on the
you
radio
saw, or what?
and things that you saw that day.
Tell me something you saw you'll never forget.
We can move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask
So
the
the
chief
other
about
one-
the mosque. Is that the same thing Jose Cotty says? Ask the chief about the mosque. Or is that something else?
It's probably, I don't know if he's asking about the mosque fire. He may be.
Okay.
So Jose Cotty is on the rescue in Jersey City.
And you
Phenomenal. Let me just say this: phenomenal young man. He's a flight nurse. He's actually yeah. He not only does firefighting, but he does
you have a lot of toy fire trucks in your office on your desk.
Yeah.
And you said that had to do with 9/11.
Yeah. So I've got a bunch of memorabilia and the like, but I'm very close to the special operations firefighters. Shout out to those of you who are on the Rock, who were friends of mine that I lost that day. Lieutenant Peter Martin, Rescue 2, was a great asset to us when we first got our rescue started. Chief Ray Downey, Special Operations Chief, FDNY. Jack Fanning, Hazmat Chief.
And so each truck represents one friend you lost?
Yeah.
Colleague? How many do you have?
Yeah. Probably 12.
Wow.
Probably 12 of them.
And you're hearing about that with New Haven Fire Chief John Alston Jr. here on Dateline New Haven, WNHH 103.5 FM live stream to newhavenevent.org. DJ Rob Nice has joined us, as has James Casella. Says Jose is phenomenal.
Oh, you're getting all the Jersey City folks on there.
Michael Davis, I just lost him. Michael Davis, sir, asset to the fire service. Wish you were still here. So, what was the other day you'll never forget?
I was a firefighter. I wasn't on rescue at the time. I was with actually my other buddy, Freddie Manzo, and so we got a call for a fire. I believe it was on Dwight Street. It was a 3-story building
in Jersey City.
6-family, and a mother came out and said that she had left her children inside the room, and she was telling us, and we're thinking which room. We're thinking the bedroom, and so we were there with Engine 8. We got there, had to make a search without the line, and you could see the bedroom on fire, and you could see the cribs, because they're babies. I believe they're 6 months old, and so we went in, searched twins. So we went in, searched it, couldn't find it. We thought we got the cribs, searched the cribs. There were dolls in the cribs. They weren't babies. Thank God. So we came out, and we were asking the mother. She says, no, they're in there. They're in there. So we go in again, and we finally get a line, because the first time we didn't have a line. Hose line. Mm-hmm. So probably one of the most dangerous times you can search a room or search above a fire is when you don't have the protection of a hose line. Most of the time, we search under the protection of a hose line. So,
meaning you're putting out flames as you walk into
exactly.
Now, this room was on fire or above the fire?
That room was on fire, and it was the original fire apartment. And the second time we went in, we did another thorough search. And when I came out, I actually ended up putting my hands on their head. They were on the couch. They weren't in the bedroom.
And the couch was on fire or just hot?
No,
smoky?
Just hot and smoky. Yeah.
So their breathing must have been in danger.
Yeah.
And 2 kids?
2
6
set
months
of twins, 6 months old.
How did they get there?
Well, they were just there. They lived there with their mom, but
they can't move on their own in 6 months.
No, can't. No.
So the mom ran out.
Yeah.
But how come she didn't carry them?
Yeah. I think she had 2 other kids in her hands, but
she had 2 other kids in her hands.
So those are like the.
What were you thinking when you went in? Were you in danger?
We were thinking that we could make the grab. We were thinking that even though conditions weren't too favorable, there was enough light, believe it or not, from the fire to see what we were doing.
What time of day was it?
This was the evening, like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Were you thinking this is the kind of moment you think about as a firefighter? Were you aware at the time this is a do or die death moment?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And so when you put your hand in the head, what happened next?
Oh, I knew instantly what I was touching. Yeah.
Oh, because it was so smoky, you didn't know?
Yeah, I didn't know.
So you're just feeling around?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So you were feeling
So
around.
fires are not like, let me clear this up. Fires are not like television. All right. So they're just not. If you see fires, you see the movie Backdraft. And thanks to Ron Howard for doing a wonderful film to kind of give an inkling of what we actually do. But what we really do is in the dark. You will not see. You can't see your hand in front of your
it's
face.
as though you're blind.
Correct.
You had a fire hose in your hand?
No, we went in without one. Yeah.
Oh, I thought the second time you had the hose.
Yeah, no. They were in the room, but we were way
they
ahead
were
of
clearing
it.
your way.
Oh, yeah, way
so
ahead of it.
you can't see. You're moving your hand around, and you put your hand on two objects that you instantly knew were heads.
Instantly knew.
So what'd you do next?
Got a flashlight. I was in with, he's retired battalion chief now, Captain John Ruddy. Shout out to him. Phenomenal man who kind of coached us after that to, kind of ground us afterwards. But yeah, so instantly we grabbed the flashlight and saw what they were, and I, as a father, as a firefighter, I wanted to pick them up, but I knew I couldn't.
Why?
Because at this point now the medical examiner has to come in.
Well, they were alive.
Yeah, they weren't.
They were dead.
Nah.
You saw them and they were dead.
Yeah.
How'd you know they were dead? Oh my God.
Yeah. Don't want to describe it just in case you got some younger listeners on right now.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, but you knew they were.
So first you said, "Oh, I found them! Hooray!" Right? Were you happy when you touched their heads? Then you looked down there.
Instantly.
That was a smoke inhalation.
Yeah, that and the heat.
So what'd you do next?
Nothing. I had to leave.
And what was going through your mind?
Oh, everything. I mean, after that shift, I went home and crawled in bed with my kids and cried. I had a 2-year-old at home.
Would you go home and hug him?
Oh, absolutely. Crawl right into bed with them. Yeah.
He's a firefighter now.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes.
Yeah.
But so you said, how long does it take to process something like that? You talked about 9/11 took you years.
You still process it. Yeah. So you go through this. You go through all the
What year was that, by the way?
Oh, that had to be 92. 92. Yeah, 1992. Wow.
So you're 7 years or so on the force.
Yeah.
And Chris Forsland says, "Hey, Chief." Steve Anthony Cousin Jr. says, "Hey, Chief." Erica Bogan, proud to serve with Fire Chief Alston and Fort Charles Alston. And you're listening to that on Dateline New Haven, 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhaven.org. So your son was 2 at the time. What was his name?
Malcolm.
And Malcolm. Was he named after Malcolm X?
Yeah, and Malcolm Forbes. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And I can see a link, which is like get
so
your
if
own
you tell
capital
your kids
to
they
succeed
can
in your
be
own.
whatever they want to be. My oldest is John. He's named after me and my dad. And he's 3 years older than him. And so when you tell your children they can be whatever they want to be, don't be surprised. They could come back as Malcolm X or Malcolm Forbes.
So did Malcolm become Malcolm X or Malcolm Forbes?
I think a combination of both. I think he became both. It's interesting because I never pushed any of them to be firefighters, and so
and they both became
didn't.
firefighters.
No, just the one.
Oh, just one.
Yeah, my oldest is in Atlanta. He went to school at Morehouse, graduated there, came north, got his master's, went back to work as a recruiter in admissions for Morehouse, and now he's at Clark Atlanta doing it. He's the academic. He's on track to do his academic thing, and
awesome. Mm-hmm. And then Malcolm became a firefighter.
Yeah, Malcolm went to school.
That?
He went to Liberty University.
Oh my God, Jerry Falwell.
So I told you, if you never know which direction you.
Boy, you never know which Malcolm. How they either would have done
right.
it. For,
that's why I said
how do you
both.
end up at Liberty? Very religious kid.
Yeah, well, we're a Christian family. Yeah,
but Liberty's not just Christian.
Yeah,
it's like Jerry Falwell started.
That's Jerry Falwell. Yeah, but so he went to Timothy Christian Academy. Shout out Piscataway. And that's almost like a feeder school for there. So, yeah.
And how did he go from there to be a firefighter?
He graduated, and he wanted to. They were hiring in Plainfield, where we live, and I said, "Why don't you give it a try? You don't have a job. It'll be the best summer job you can. They'll pay you while you get trained, and if you don't like it, go ahead and quit. But give it a shot." And he says, "Yeah, I think I'm going to do it." And I said, "Why don't you want to do it in Jersey City?" He says, "Well, it'd be better that I don't work with you." So he says that. Well, one, he was 2 years old when we moved to Plainfield, so he knows that city. But the other joke we have going is, if I ended up working with you, I might end up getting fired, or I might end up working somewhere where somebody said something stupid about you. and I ended up getting fired. So let me
Sounds
stay.
like a smart kid.
He's a smart kid, both of
So,
them.
just one last question on that you never forget. What do you
Sure.
draw from that? What did that teach you about firefighting? How did it impact the way you look at the job? What was the lesson of that harrowing experience?
So the lesson I got from it is, don't always assume that you're going to find people in the bedroom, okay, no matter what age, okay? That's the first thing. Second, that, and this happened instantly, even on my next call, be very careful when you're speaking to someone about their last act. Like if they just ran out of the building, where were you? What did you do? Because not too long after that, we had another fire where we lost 2 children, but they hid. They hid in a closet. And the amazing thing is the adults had run out, thinking the kids had gotten out, and they hadn't. The kids had run and hide. They ran and hid. And a little boy, and there was a little girl. And the amazing thing about this instinct that we have in our minds and in our being, the little girl was probably about 8 or 9 years old. The boy was about 4 or 5. She instinctively pushed him to the bottom of the closet, put clothes on top of him, laid on top of him, and put clothes on top of herself.
But you lost them.
But we lost them.
Now, what was the lesson there about listening? Was the parent who ran out not telling you enough?
Just making sure that when you talk to those people, getting as much information as possible. Where were you? Where was the last place that you saw them?
And had you done that there?
No, because many times we just run in.
And how about on the first case with the 2 kids on the couch? Had you not asked the mother where the kids were?
Yeah, we did. But she just says they were in the room, in the room, in the room. So you're thinking that time of night, you're thinking bedroom.
So what could you have done differently in retrospect?
In retrospect, not be like a moth to the flame. Not go to that room that's burning and search your way in.
So go gradually.
We're trained to search as close to the fire as you can and work your way back.
So do you feel you made an assumption that when she said the room, she meant bedroom, and that if you could have done it all over?
If I could have done it all over, we would have found them sooner, but I don't know if there would have been a different outcome.
I mean, obviously, that's the case when you're a firefighter. I'm sure life or death is partly in your hands, but maybe not as much as you think.
Sure.
I wonder if you look at a case like that where obviously the kids were dead and you weren't going to save them, but I wonder if you feel guilt that you saved.
Of course you do. Let me tell you something. There are folks that, like me, for a couple of years, I felt guilty about 9/11, which I had no control.
Why'd you feel guilty?
Well, maybe not guilt, but survivor's remorse. You know,
like why they die and not you.
Yeah. It could have happened anywhere.
So how do you?
And I have friends in New York that are still going through that as well.
So how do you, as a chief, take that knowledge in how you direct your firefighters today?
Well, New Haven knows I am a proponent of making sure that we take advantage of the Employee Assistance Program,
EAP,
and that we just recently had some classes where we train many of our members to become peer support people, making sure that our officers know that it's not an option to ask for help, that we can't take a chance on missing anyone. There was a lot.
I talk about that with police officials, and they say they have a hard time getting officers to go to EAP, and they have that problem with domestic violence cases. They say they feel it's not strong. You feel they're showing that's for weaklings. How do you deal with that in the fire department? How do you get them to go to EAP?
You get the culture to change. So we've got several populations in the fire service now. We've got some, I don't like the tags of the millennials, the veterans, but we do have several different demographics, and each of them brings a unique experience to the fire service, and so we have to address it on that level. But we also have to address it on just making sure that they know that they have access to it. Try to remove the stigma, change the culture, letting them know from the top down. I'm a person who benefited from EAP, from talking to people, getting past issues. It works. There's something about the way we're wired as human beings that when we talk about things, and particularly, and I don't want to get into the gender thing,
relief.
But traditionally, I would say, many times, because it was a male-driven occupation, and the image of the firefighter being rugged and tough and can handle so many things, we would not ask for help. And that culture had to change.
What help did you really receive after that 1992 fire where you lost the children, or after 9/11 personally?
We had some great officers. Like I said, I will never forget Captain John Ruddy.
RUDDY?
RUDDY, grabbed Freddie and I right away. He said, come with me. You guys okay? So, yeah, okay. It's okay. And he just talked about exactly what we went through. And this was the same captain I was on a call with where we had a kid hit by a car and his leg was mangled pretty bad. And this was an instance where, you know, of course, as a parent, you see this kid in this situation, and Captain Ruddy was one of those people that was there as well, and it was his mannerism. It was just
so it was on the scene on Dwight Street in Jersey City right after you saw these two kids dead.
He was right in the room with us. Yeah.
It was outside, right?
No, but he brought us outside to talk to us, and he addressed it right away.
What did he say?
Basically, he said, "There's not much we could have done in there. I know you're going to feel bad, and you're going to feel bad again because this is something that will affect you. But if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it. And if you don't want to talk about it, it's okay. But I want you to know you just experienced something horrible. And if you don't feel something, I'm concerned." And just to hear that from an officer as a young firefighter.
Did you then go to the equivalent of EAP or peer counseling?
Roughly. Back then, we weren't doing critical incident stress debriefing the way we do now. It wasn't a formalized approach. In fact, firefighters who've been on the job more than 25, 30 years, you know what we used to do. We would go out and drink. We would go out and we would tell off-color jokes as a way of diffusing it. We did a lot of coping mechanisms, self-defense mechanisms to try and get through the day. And many firefighters ended up getting divorced because we didn't handle our issues in the proper manner. We didn't know.
So back then you had the right model of a supervisor who knew to deal with you personally, but you didn't have institutional to fall back on. So now, can you think of a case in New Haven where you thought of that Captain Ruddy, where you went to a traumatic scene and you helped firefighters deal with it and help them go to EAP?
Sure.
What will be an example?
Okay, so I won't get into specifics.
I don't mean a specific firefighter. I mean, what was the specific incident?
No, I won't even get into the specific incident. What I will say is that there have been times when we have had traumatic events here in the city, and I've gone to the firehouse, and I always leave it to the professionals, but I share some of the stories that I've had because it always helps peer-to-peer. It always helps that, especially a firefighter knows that you went through exactly almost the same thing that they went through, and the best way to get that diffused before you take any issues home, and making sure we changed our protocol that our officers can call, even if they don't think it rises to the level of calling a counselor in. What they can do is we have a 24-hour number. We can call them and say, hey, this is exactly what happened. Do you think this reaches one of those parameters? Do you think this is something that might trigger some issues for us? And most times, 9 times out of 10, they're telling us we'll be there in 20 minutes.
Who's they?
That's behavioral health consultants. They're contracted with the city.
Are they EAP?
They're
so
EAP.
What you changed in protocol is that there's a trigger where you're supposed to call, a supervisor calls them in?
Correct.
And did they then approach the officers?
Correct. And we place that company or companies off duty. They have a list of some that are automatic. Just automatic, you're going to call. And then the ones that are marginal and you're not sure, you're able to call that number and talk to a professional counselor who will tell you, yeah, I think you should leave them off duty and we're on our way. Or I think you handled it properly and just monitor them.
So just so I understand, the different protocol now is that certain common instances automatically a supervisor calls EAP and they tell you whether to let people off duty now and whether they should physically come or not.
Correct.
That sounds very interesting. And you're hearing about that and how to deal with trauma and stress as firefighters from the fire chief in New Haven, John Alston Jr. here on WNHH's Dateline New Haven. Alex Gonzalez checks and says, hello, Sean O'Connor, class 5811. Deborah Howard, awesome.
Class 5811.
So in terms of one thing that struck me, 2 things when they had all those overdoses on the green this summer. The fire department was the front line. And I hung out a little bit with the folks on Great Avenue, saw the stress they were under, but the good way they dealt with people. You were right on the scene when people were overdosing over 100 times in 2 days on the green.
Sure.
First thing is you told me not to take pictures of people's faces, which was very interesting. You were thinking about their dignity. And then you were also told me you would put into place a rotation so that firefighters on the front line were promptly getting expelled, so they weren't working straight through, but dealing face to face with that trauma. Tell me about that.
Sure. Okay. So the reason why we ask you not to take pictures, and we would hope that most of our media partners and outlets would understand this. This is probably one of the worst days a person's going through. We're not even going to talk about HIPAA violations. We're just talking about common courtesy and common decency. And I've even said it to some of them. What if it were you or someone in your family? Would you really want the worst day that they're going through publicized 1,000 times?
And that was helpful to me, because obviously when you're in a crisis situation, I always defer to police or fire to guide me.
Sure.
So we got lots of very good pictures without their face.
Exactly.
I thought about it later, and I respected where you're coming from. I think you're probably right. The one factor I thought away from that was that addiction has shame, and that if we don't give it a face, it might make it harder for society to deal with, because you're not saying those are real people with names and faces. I still think you're right, because at that moment, you can't interview someone who's just OD'd instead of you someone who want to bring a face to it, or you're just humiliated. So I think you were right. I just wondered, as with suicide, we follow the protocol. We don't put the name of suicide.
Correct.
My wife, for one, thinks that that's a mistake, because she thinks that society has stigmatized suicide and putting names and faces. So that's more of a philosophical question.
So let's deal with the philosophical. I play that role
and I do
sometimes.
think you're right, by the way.
But
and
think
I just
about
thought about it.
By putting the name and putting the face, what value does that add to the story unless the person is known by someone else? Because if I don't know you and I see you as an image, you know what I'm looking at as why did they put their picture in there?
See, that's again why I think you were right, because in balance, also the person doesn't have agency. Like often when someone's going through trauma, we give them the option without pushing them. If we interview them, that sometimes it's healing for them to speak publicly. I think the value to having the name and face, just so the reader realizes that real people just like me might be addicted and have this. But I think it's outweighed by privacy concerns and not humiliating people who are in tough circumstances. I just think there is a balance.
In this day and age, most people know someone or come into contact or had an encounter with someone who's an addict of some kind.
Most of us had that
because
in our families.
Exactly. So the value of it striking home is real. But the other thing that you talked about, the second point, was with the firefighters. That day we had 116 overdoses in a 30-hour period, roughly 36 hours. And so firefighters, because they work those 3-day shifts, that 3 straight days, we had the same people responding to the green. So I remember Engine 4, Engine 6, they had gone to like 8 or 9 calls in 1 hour. All right. And so what happens is we have to be very careful. One, it's wear and tear on our firefighters. It's emotional. That's one thing. That's one of the stress factors we look for. But there's also something called compassion fatigue, that when you start to provide this type of urgent help and care over and over again, and sometimes the same victim, you tend not to give the best care that you can. Okay, so we have to be concerned about that too. So we set up a rotation plan, and what was great, New Haven firefighters, shout out to you on that day and every day. Phenomenal job. They didn't want to go off. I said, okay, why don't you take an hour? I'm going to bring another company in. They're like, Chief, we're good. No, you're not good. You need to take an hour. We're ready.
That's when it comes from an experienced chief to make the call.
You have to make that call.
It's a little paternalistic, but that's what you are.
Sure, absolutely. So they would get home. They would get back to the firehouse, and they're calling me. We're ready. Half an hour. I said, no, mandatory hour. But they could hear those calls, and they know their district. Yeah. And every fire district in the city of New Haven, shout out to you folks again, they're very protective. They know their district. They know the neighbors. They know the businesses. And so when they hear that and they're in trouble, they want to get out there and help. So,
all right. And then in aftermath, there was some discussion of how the firefighters, we might have asked too much of them. That it turned out they later had a triage center on the green, that certain people, if they're looked at by people who have knowledge about medicine, medical conditions, they would know that they didn't need to go to the emergency room. Some did. And
Correct.
Some just needed to just chill for a minute, and let's talk about setting up, though it hasn't happened.
Correct.
Setting up some kind of center around from the green, a block or two, where you could have people just sort of detox while they're
sure.
And have you re-examined that since?
Oh, absolutely. That's an ongoing conversation. Mayor Harp has been great in allowing, under her leadership, multiple agencies to work together and look at that. So you have Dr. Millay over at Community Services Agency, Fire Service, Cornell Scott. You also have Yale emergency staff who were actually right there with us.
Remember?
We also came out with these palm cards that are on every fire engine now. We partnered with Cornell that they would leave with a victim of suspected overdose, because some of the folks that were experiencing that were 2 days from getting a bed in a facility.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wanted to bridge that gap, because the more that we can reduce the number of people overdosing and calling the 911 system, the better.
Mm-hmm.
So right now that's on every fire engine, fire truck, piece of apparatus that's left with either a family if they're there or loved ones, but also placed in that person's pocket to get them the detox programs that they need.
Charles Fletcher Saley says, way to go, Chief. So time flew by. That's so much more I wanted to ask you about. I guess, how long has it been since the fire contract expired? They're working on an expired contract now, right?
Oh, yeah. June of last year.
Of 2018.
Yeah, it was 2018. So we're in active negotiations.
Is there
now.
Arbitration, or is it not going to need to go?
No. We're in off the record discussions now. We haven't gone under formal. That'll be starting soon. We've had several meetings.
What are the big issues? Is it salary or minimum staffing?
Well, you know me by now. I don't show my cards there. Right. Well, nice try.
No, and if I knew how to play poker, I would not face off.
Yeah, well, guess what? I'm quite sure that everyone in the New Haven Fire Department just rose to the edge of their seat right now with that question. Don't worry, I'm not giving away the goods.
Maybe, and tell me again if this is another category you can't talk about. There was a fire at the Whitney Avenue train station. Okay. I mean, fire station. You had to close that for a while.
Yes.
And there's always been that debate: do we need that fire station, or will therefore take too long to get? Take too long to get engines there. What did we learn from that experience?
We learned that
it's okay.
Oh, of course we can talk about it. So we actually had the opportunity, the misfortune of having a fire station go offline due to fire. But the other part of it is that we got to see whether, while that station was off, did it affect service in the area, and it did. We saw an increase of almost close to a minute and a half on our routine responses there.
Were those crucial? Were those life and death minutes?
They could have been, yeah. And the other part of it is we don't just do fires. We do more medical calls. 80% of our calls are medical. So even in those moments, and you can look on the city's website, we've got enough videos up to show the difference between a fire that's caught within a minute, that first minute and a half, how fast it can grow. The other thing that we've seen is that when we go on these medical calls, the difference in life-saving defibrillation and making sure even just getting a person's airway open in those first couple of minutes is significant.
All right. Well, Beth Lee Kirshner writes in, sounds like you need to invite Chief Alston for a second show. That's great.
Goodness.
Tawana Brown says, great job, Chief. So Beth Lee Kirshner, I agree. Chief Alston, you are hereby invited to return to Dateline, New Haven.
It would be my pleasure. Anytime I can talk about the great work of the New Haven Fire Department, I'm yours.
Well, I always love talking to you, and I especially enjoyed it today. Thank you for coming on the air.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone who wrote in and listened. Thank you to the Yale New Haven Hospital for providing support for today's program. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Now we know what it's like to be free. We just got to remember to book our flight. Fly free with us all day and all night here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.